you can't build housing and expect people to be there, or you can't have housing stock and expect people to be there if you don't have the schools, you don't have the infrastructure, and most importantly, the work, right? And so it's not a really easy fix. You can't really put policy into place that quickly and expect people to shift like that, right? Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our latest episode of Pioneers Pathway podcast. As always, you're here with me, Liam Villani, and my good friend Sharia Garkle. How are you doing, Sharia?
All good, my friend. All good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. It's quite an interesting one, quite topical for me as well. Today's topic, coming from Spain. I'm currently living and studying here in Spain. I think we've spoken about it before, and quite a topical one because looking at sort of the 100% tax levy that the Spanish government are putting on foreign ownership of property over here. We thought it would be a really interesting topic, right, to discuss. Let me just say as a disclaimer, just so that everyone knows, it's 100% tax on non-EU ownership, right? I think that's quite important to know, and quite important to say at the forefront. But any starting reactions to that, Sharia? Any thoughts?
Well, I have to say it's quite interesting one, to be honest, right? Because obviously the UK was once part of the EU. We're no longer, part of the EU. But definitely, many, British residents for a number of years have been buying holiday homes in Spain. And it's been going on for many, many years now, right? It's a very popular tourist destination. So now that makes me think there's going to be a lot of wider impacts on this as well, right? So do you see British tourists move away from Spain? Right. I mean, that's obviously a clear possibility. If you can't buy a house where traditionally you were able to, your holiday home, do you go to a different country where maybe such a tax isn't levied? Or do you go for other solutions like an Airbnb? Does Airbnb get a boost out of this? So there are lots of different, things that we have to consider here. What about you? What are your thoughts, especially as a Spanish resident?
I think it's interesting. Yep, I'm a student here in Spain, so I've got the student residency over here. And my parents have a holiday home here, so we've kind of seen it firsthand. I'd say it's interesting, right? Because the main reason for doing this is there is a shortage of housing in Spain, and people living here, ordinary Spanish citizens and residents, can't find suitable and affordable accommodation, right? And so that's why they've then put this into place. But it's interesting, right? Because a lot of foreign ownership of property tends to happen on the south coast. And south coast, like the Costa del Sol, the holiday resorts there, that's where a lot of the foreign ownership happens, especially from people from the UK and from other parts of Europe, right? And it's interesting because the expectation is that if you're going to put that less foreign ownership of these places, the people already in Spain who can't afford accommodation will move in there. But a lot of people said, what's to say why would they move from the big major cities with work and schooling and education, and they go to these holiday resorts in the middle of nowhere and start living there, right? What's the rationale for that, right? You can't build housing and expect people to be there, or you can't have housing stock and expect people to be there if you don't have the schools, you don't have the infrastructure, and most importantly, the work, right? And so it's not a really easy fix. You can't really put policy into place that quickly and expect people to shift like that, right?
Yeah, no, actually, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because you have one point of view where you can say, okay, well, now all these people who weren't able to buy a house in the main cities can move to these, sort of coastal towns, maybe set up a business there, and just change their whole, sort of residency to these parts of Spain. But on the other hand, you have to question and say, well, hang on, if their whole livelihood hasn't been in that area, how can you expect them to, set up base in a completely different part of the country? And after this, who knows if you'll get the same tourist turnout? So even though you might be encouraging them to set up businesses in such an area, what's the guarantee you'll still get the same footfall after such a policy? So in that sense, you really have to question, what is the thinking there?
Setting up the businesses. It's not just setting up the businesses, though. It's people just having ordinary jobs, right? You can't let's just use the example of the finance industry in Spain. Yep, the major financial hubs are Barcelona and Madrid, right? So that's the major financial hubs. That's where all the work is. So just looking at that one specific industry, how can you expect people to then go to the likes of Malaga, Marbella, the Costa del Sol and start working there, right? So unless there's a remote working option, which at the moment is very, very limited in the finance industry in particular, how can you expect people to then move there and then be able to find work in those industries, not just finance, but maybe engineering, medical sides and stuff like that? You can't, right? So if you really want people to be using those places, that you need to bring industry there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And like you mentioned with finance, especially, we see a lot of the big banks, especially in the USA, they're bringing back a return to office policy. Now, if you expect them to go to a remote part of Spain and you expect them to work there, I doubt the employers will be too happy, especially when you're quite close to, the beach. I'm pretty sure. I don't think any employer would be happy with that. I'm sure they'd be expecting half the employees to run off to the beach half the time. So
Do you know remote working can be good? Remote working, as from the government side, can be really good, because you can revitalize places where people have left, right? The suburbs, the urban and the rural areas, right? And there's a lot of sort of nomad visas, things like that, to try to attract people to villages and towns which have been decimated by urbanization, right? But you have to make sure that there are jobs which allow people to do that, right?
yeah,
You
absolutely.
have to allow that, and at the moment, it's not the case universally.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, it's never, as simple as you put in policy and you expect to yield the perfect result, right? There are lots of other things. There's a positive side and there's a negative side to every sort of government policy. Now, it remains to be seen what will happen in this case, but I think it's quite clear that we both are pretty skeptical on it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think it's the case, and a lot of people bringing back home to maybe the UK. I know we've been talking about Spain, but in the UK, in terms of tourism and also with sort of urbanization in general, it's quite interesting because London is the capital, and that's where a lot of the business and the work is, and a lot of people end up having to move into the south of England towards London for jobs, and that's left behind. The north. I know Manchester and Leeds and Newcastle and those areas have had a lot of regeneration, but the north is still a massive divide, right? And it's sort of it's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to change, at least in our lifetime, because the North-South debate, it's been going on for way longer than, I don't know, it's been going on for longer than we were born, to be honest. And the way
Yeah.
it's going, I don't think it's going to change. They try to bring in HS to try, bring some change with that. And I was actually speaking to a friend of mine about this recently. And we basically said that, look, you've spent, I don't know how many £1 billion on such a project to try and bring that north-south divide closer. It hasn't worked. You've had to scrap it in the end. So really, what would you do in that case, right? Do you just accept
Yeah.
defeat? I don't know.
No, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. And transportation is important. Schooling is important. Infrastructure is crucial. And it's not something you can change overnight. But that sort of long-term vision is important. I definitely in the Spanish case, they spend a lot of money on infrastructure, and it's really good. The infrastructure, the trains, the metro, the transportation, even the airports are. There's loads of airports dotted across the country, and it's a really good network. But in the end of the day, people need work. And if you've not got work, you can't afford to use the transport, you can't afford to buy a house, you can't afford to live. And so you need that work and you need the employment.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, you also need to be able to buy a house, right? Or else this scheme stops in the first
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, yeah. So you can put taxes on the properties, but if the people who you're designing this for can't even afford to buy the house or buy the property, what's the point in it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. But yeah, let's if any of the viewers have any views or want to give us your opinions or ideas, let us know. Comments on the posts and stuff like that. And yeah, let us know if you have any ideas of what they can do. But yeah, it's been great, Shario. Maybe we can have a chat about this further down the line. Maybe the Spanish government will do something different. Policy might change. So hopefully a long-term conversation.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, look,
Good.
especially when it comes to housing, that's a problem all over Europe. So it remains to be seen, what policies different governments come out with.
Yeah, exactly. Really interesting stuff. So yeah, I think I'm not gonna elaborate maybe on some of the topics we've got coming up. But all I can say is we've got some good interviewees in the pipework. So please stay tuned and also get in touch, share your ideas, share your views, share some topic ideas that you may have. We'd love to have the conversation with you guys. So yeah, thank you guys, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you.